Bawat araw, tayo'y humaharap sa mga nangyayari sa lipunan. Mga pangyayari na nakakaapekto sa ating lahat. Mga pangyayari na kailangan tayong makialam. Kaya nabuo ang programang ito, Issue 101. Tumatalakay sa mga issue ng ating lipunan. Mga issue na dapat nating pakialaman. Mga issue na may malaking kaugnayan sa ating kapaligiran. At mga issue na may kaugnayan sa ating gobyerno. Issue 101. Narito ang inyong tagapagsalita. Issue 101. You're with Senior Simon. Senior Simon. Senior Simon. Issue 101.
Luzon, Visayas at Mindanao. Buong sa buong Pilipinas, buong mundo na may Pilipino. Welcome sa isa namang episode ng ating palatuntunan ang araw ngayon na Lunes at 23 ng Pebrero taong 2026, February 23, 2026, Monday. Kumusta pa kayong lahat dyan? Maasa ako na nasa mabuti po kayong kalagayan. Malulusog ang inyong pangangatawan. Welcome sa isa namang episode ng ating palatuntunan ng
Issue 101.
kung saan tatalakayin natin sa episode ngayon, mga ka-isyo, ating pag-usapan ang unang banat ng depensa sa pamamagitan ni Atty. Nicolas Kaufman sa unang araw ng confirmation hearing ni Dating Pangulong Rodrigo Duterte. Grabe mga ka-isyo. By the way, natapos na pala, nag-suspend na pala ang hearing kanina, mga ka-isyo. At ang huling nagsalita ay ang prosecution. Ating subaybayan yan mamaya, mga kaisyo. Pero ang atin pong tututukan sa episode natin ngayon dito sa Issue 101, itong unang banat ni Atty. Nicolas Kaufman, ang abogado ni dating Pangulong Rodrigo Duterte. Pero bago po natin umpisahan ang ating talagayan, huwag po kalimutan na mag-like sa video na ito. I-click nyo po ang subscribe button at ang notification bell sana all para kayo ay mapapalahanan kung sakasakaling tayo may live stream katulad nito. At huwag po din ninyong kalimutan na suportahan at i-follow nyo po at i-like ang ating Facebook fan page. Pati na rin ang ating X account. Suportahan nyo po sana ang ating mga social media, ang ating pong existence sa internet, mga ka-isyo. Kaya wag na po tayong magpaligoy-ligoy pa. Umpisa na natin na may nakalimutan pa pala ako, mga ka-isyo. Sumali din po kayo sa ating mga ka-isyo sa Issue 101 official group page. Sa magitan po kasi ng group page na to, mga ka-isyo, ay tuloy-tuloy ang ating ugnayan, tuloy-tuloy ang ating talakayan. Pwede po kayong mag-post dito as long as it is appropriate, ha? Yung appropriate lang. Okay, mga guys, umpisa na natin ang ating talakayan dito sa ating palatuntunan ng kasama pong iyong likod si
Senior Simon. Senior Simon.
Over to the defence. Mr. Kaufman, please.
And I thank Mr. Tunghayan for his intervention, but I feel that I ought to remind him that this is a court of law.
Okay, no? Unang bahagi pa lang ng ganyang salita, di pananalita or presentation dito, mga or opening statement dito ni Atty. Kaufman. Binanatan niya kaagad itong si Atty. Buntuyan. Parang Atty. Butuyan. Atty. Buntuyan, mga kaisyo. Binanatan kaagad.
Which decides matters on the basis of evidence, not on the basis of political demagoguery.
Kasi, mga kaisyo, ang sinundan kasi dito ni Atty. Kaufman, para po sa hindi nakapanood, ay itong statement ni Buntuyan bilang counsel to the victims. Di umano, mga biktima daw ito, mga kaisyo, ng drug war ng dating Pangulong Duterte. So, itong si Buntuyan, of course, no, obvious naman ang kanyang apelyido, Pilipino na counsel, siya ang abogado ng mga biktima. Di umano ng drug war mga kaisyo, pero ang kanya kasing pinagsasabi mga kaisyo ay parang political statement na. So binandatan siya kagad ni Atty. Kaufman na itong statement ni Buntuyan ay dapat magbase siya sa kanyang pagpapahayag base sa ebidensya na kanyang na kakibat dito sa kaso ng dating Pangulong Duterte.
And I thank Mr. Tuyan for his intervention, but I feel that I ought to remind him that this is a court of law which decides matters on the basis of evidence, not on the basis of political demagoguery, and not on the basis of a desire to effect regime change despite the democratic will. And certainly not on the basis of statements made by Ombudsman Jesus Crispin Remulla, who professed that domestic justice will be denied, according to Mr. Butuyan, because of the lack of forensic reports and police reports.
Kasi mga kaesyo, kasi sa sinabi nitong si Atty. Buntuyan mga kaesyo na nakakahiyang abogado na siya pa mismo ang nagpapakita sa buong mundo, sa international community na mahina ang ating justice system sa bansa. Itong nakakahiyang abogado na nasa The Hague ngayon na tumatayong abogado ng mga biktima di umano ng drug war ng dating Pangulong Duterte. Kasi ang sinabi niya dito, kinote niya si dating Department of Justice Secretary na ngayon Ombudsman na itong si Boboyang Rimulya, na sabi niya na walang halos record o ebidensya na makakaugnay kay dating Pangulong Duterte dito sa patayan daw na nangyari during sa war on drugs. Yan ang sinabi ni Rimulya. Pero nagtataka tayo mga kaisyo, ba't umabot ang kaso doon sa dahig na dito pa lang sa ating bayan, dito pa lang sa sarili nating bansa mga kaisyo, wala na ngang ebidensya. Paano nakakuha ng ebidensya itong mga dayuhan, itong mga puti at may isa pang itim dyan na assistant prosecutor mga kaisyo? Yan kasi ang gusto natin na matuklasan kung paano na itong mga dayuhan, itong dayuhang korte nakakuha ng ebidensya, pero umamin itong dating Department of Justice Secretary na si Boyang Rimulya na ngayon Ombudsman na walang makitang ebidensya. Is that magic?
Now, I don't know which case Mr. Butuyan's metaphorical ship sailed into, but he clearly hasn't read the evidence. Whilst he was speaking, we examined the evidence, and out of that evidence we found at least 35 reports substantiating 49 of the incidents which are mentioned in a document containing the charges. Your Honours, Rodrigo Duterte was and will always remain a unique phenomenon. His style of statesmanship was novel and unpalatable to many. His expletives and hyperbole grated, while his honesty and wild popularity irritated. He spoke openly, from the heart, sincerely and truthfully. And what a contrast between him and his successor in the Malacanang.
Kasi itong isang abogado din mga kaisyo ng prosecution na nagpakita siya, ito yung pinakahuling bahagi ng unang araw dito sa confirmation hearing na ito mga kaisyo. Nagpakita siya ng video na para bang kilala niya ang ugali ng mga Pilipino, most especially ng mga Bisaya. no? Yung nagpapatawa, yung nagpa-hyperbole, yung mga sarcasm na mga pananalita, mga kaisyo, mayroon kasing mga ugali itong mga Bisaya na kakaiba sa mga Tagalog, no? Most specifically mga kaisyo sa the way magsalita, no? Katulad ng tawag sa langgam, yung langgam sa mga Tagalog, iba ang langgam dito sa mga Bisaya. O sa amin mga Bisaya, yung kumot sa mga Tagalog, iba ang kumot dito sa amin sa mga Bisaya. Yung mga katulad bang ganyan, na itong abogado na ito yung abogado ng prosecution mga kaisyo, na para bang pinisinta niya yung mga talumpati ng dating Pangulong Duterte, na iniugnay niya na umamin ang dating Pangulong Duterte mga kaisyo sa kanyang na may kasalanan siya nagawa, na pumatay siya ng maraming tao. Pero iba ang konteksto pag ikaw ang Bisaya, ikaw na isang Bisaya, makinig ka sa kanyang talumpati o sa kanyang pagsasalita, lalo na kung ang kanyang mga audience ay karaniwang tao mga kaisyo. Maintindihan mo kung sarcasm ba, hyperbole ba, o nagpapatawa ang dating Pangulong Duterte. Pero iba. Itong sa depensa, sa prosecution mga kaisyo, atin pong paglaanan ito ng ibang episode. Pero dito tayo, balikan natin itong si Atty. Kaufman.
For President Rudy, his word was his word, and the people knew it. For President Bongbong, his word is for the wind, and the people will not. For President Rudy, his word was his word, and the people knew it. For President Bongbong,
But President Bongbong, kita nyo, si Atty. Kaufman mga kaisyo, pag nang sinabi niya ang pangalan ni Bongbong,
word was his word, and the people knew it. For President Bongbong,
President Bongbong,
his word is for the wind, and the people will not forget it. Let me remind everyone of the letter which President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. signed, it's on the screen, and in which he gave a cast-iron undertaking that his government, and I quote, will not assist the ICC in any way, shape, or form. Well, as we know, he failed to keep that promise.
ito mga kaisyo ha, nagpapakita ito ha, kung ano ang ugali ni Bongbong. Ang totoong ugali ni Bongbong. Ito ha mga kaisyo ha. Nagpapakita na ang kanyang mga promises, ang kanyang mga pangako, itong si Bongbong. Ang kanyang mga pangako ni Bongbong mga kaisyo, ay talagang hindi niya tinutupad. This is one of the proof. Ulit ha, pakinggan natin itong ipinakita ni Atty. Kaufman na sabi ni Bongbong na hindi magko-cooperate ang kanyang administrasyon sa ICC. This is a proof. Anti-clear. Mga ka-clear. Ka-clear dyan. Ito ay nagpapatunay na itong si Bongbong ay walang isang salita. Hindi niya ugali na tuparin kung ano man ang kanyang mga pangako. Ito ang sinasabi ni Kaufman dito. To this end, this government will not assist the ICC. This is coming from the administration of Bongbong Marcos in any way, shape, or form. Pero anong ginawa ng Bongbong na yan mga kaisyo?
Well, as we know, he failed to keep that promise.
He failed to keep that promise. Sa mga nanonood po sa atin ngayon, huwag po kalimutan na mag-subscribe. Kung hindi pa po kayo nakapag-subscribe, like, para baka sakali naman ma-recommend itong munting channel natin, itong munting video natin mga kaisyo.
Rodrigo Duterte was unconstitutional and unceremoniously hauled off to The Hague. And when called upon,
By the way ha, putol-putol po ito. Kung ma-oobserbahan nyo po mga kaisyo, putol-putol ang video. Kasi naka-replay na. Pero sa live nito mga kaisyo, putol-putol, biglang nawala. I don't know kung ito ba ay sabotahe dito sa atin o sabotahe doon sa The Hague mga kaisyo. We don't know about that. Pero pag nagsalita na itong subaybayan natin bukas mga kaisyo. At titingnan natin kung magsalita na ang depensa, kung putol-putol ba. Dahil kanina nakita naman natin, kung nakapanood po kayo ng live, tuloy-tuloy yung mga prosecution sa prosecution side. No? Tuloy-tuloy, walang loading. Pero pagdating dito na sa pagsalita ni Kaufman, wala, putol-putol. So, itong bahagi na to, naputol nga ito.
and unceremoniously hauled off to The Hague.
Ito.
As we know, he failed to keep that promise. Rodrigo Duterte was unconstitutional and
Kita nyo? Naputol? Ha?
promise. Rodrigo Duterte was unconstitutional and unceremonious.
So may bahagi mga kaisyo na hindi natin nakuha dito sa statement ni Atty. Kaufman.
Hauled off to The Hague. And when called upon to defend
Isa pa yun. Putol.
his master's actions and the said letter at a Senate committee hearing, the then Secretary for Justice, once again Mr. Jesus Crispin Remulla, persisted with the same dishonest theme. And I quote his words, "We did not assist the ICC. We continue with the very tenor of the letter that we did not assist the ICC and we did not have any contact with them."
Sinungaling na dating Justice Secretary na si Jesus Crispin Remulla. Remulla.
So he said, but with a document emanating from the prosecution team opposite and disclosed to us a mere week ago, not as information material to the preparation of our defence, but as exonerating evidence, we can now substantiate what we have suspected for a long time. The document comprises a transcript of a telephone call covertly recorded between 4 parties who cannot be mentioned in public, and one of these parties was boasting about how he was acting as the silent partner of President BBM.
Nako. Sino kaya ang tinutukoy dito ni Atty. Kaufman na naghahambog? Ano bang hambog sa Tagalog? Ipinagmalaki pa na siya daw ang silent partner ni Bongbong mga kaisyo.
How he was acting as the silent partner of President BBM, managing a scheme to funnel witnesses to this court.
Nako! Silent partner ni BBM to funnel para ipadala ang mga testigo mga kaisyo sa ICC. Nako.
While all the time ensuring that he could guarantee President BBM's plausible deniability. So it is indeed the
So saan kaya kinuha yung budget, no? Kasi itong mga pumunta doon sa The Hague mga kaisyo, sabi nila hindi daw gastos ng gobyerno ang kanilang pagpunta doon sa The Hague mga kaisyo. Pero ang daming lumalabas na mayroong nilalaang pera ang administrasyon ni Bongbong Marcos para sa mga testigo laban kay dating Pangulong Duterte. Nako. Saan kaya kinuha ang budget? Baka sa bilyong-bilyong kano ba 'yon ano? 1.2 billion ba yung confidential fund ni Bongbong?
Defense case that President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. set out to neutralize Rodrigo Duterte and his legacy. Yes, Mr. Deputy Prosecutor, I used that legendary word, neutralize, so central and so essential to your case theory, because you know just as well as me that I'm using the term metaphorically.
Kasi ginamit yung salitang neutralize. Kasi sa bahagi ng prosecution mga ka-isyo, neutralize yung term na ginamit nila sa pagpatay. Dito, kaya't sinabi ni Attorney Kaufman na basta sige.
You know just as well as me that I'm using the term metaphorically. And now I turn to the substance of the charges, but before I do, a word or two about the geopolitical context. The scourge of illegal narcotics is not unique to the Philippines. As we all know, it afflicts Latin America, where I can name 3 countries where the death rate at the hands of vigilantes and law enforcement agents per capita population is higher than it ever was under Duterte. And as you should know, and you will hear from the prosecution, at any rate, the Philippines as a country is uniquely positioned to act as a transit hub for the trafficking of narcotics emanating from the cartels in China. And with or without Duterte, so we argue, the death rate would have kept on rising. Indeed, as we will prove with statistics and reports, the death rate flowing from narcotics-related crime actually increased after Rodrigo Duterte left.
Ito mga kaisyo, ang pinunto ng bahaging ito ng talumpati nitong si Attorney Kaufman ay kahit wala o hindi naupong Pangulo, si dating Pangulong Duterte ay aangat pa rin ang bilang ng mapatay, madido na may kaugnayan sa droga, na gusto niyang iparating na kahit sino pa ang maging Pangulo, the record will say na aangat talaga ang bilang ng mamamatay na may kaugnayan sa droga, whether by taking drugs or by violence. Na gusto niya ipakita, mga ka-isyo, na kahit na natapos ang administrasyon ng dating Pangulong Duterte, marami pa rin ang namamatay dahil sa droga.
From narcotics-related crime actually increased after Rodrigo Duterte left power. And where, I ask you, has the International Criminal Court been styled that Rodrigo Duterte anything?
Napansin niyo mga kaisyo, putol-putol. Parang sinabutahe. Pag ang depensa na ang magsalita, ewan ko kung napunan nyo ito mga kaisyo. Pag depensa na ang nagsalita by Attorney Kaufman, sana bukas kasi itong ano tawag ito? Itong hearing na to, itong confirmation hearing mga kaisyo ay kanina 23, tapos bukas 24. Hindi ito hindi ito magaganap by 25. Magaganap ito ulit by 26 at 27. Na atin na po itong napag-usapan yung schedule nito mga kaisyo sa nakaraang video natin. Pero ang schedule nito is 23 ngayon, 24, tapos sa Webes 26 at saka 27 mga kaisyo. So marami pa pong pagkakataon na makarinig po tayo ng mga atake galing sa prosecution, tapos ang depensa mga kaisyo ng galing ni na team, no? ni Atty. Kaufman, mga kaisyo.
I ask you, has the International Criminal Court been seen that Rodrigo Duterte
Oh, napuputol.
anything the totally lawful Duterte campaign against illegal drugs and their suppliers took place when his administration was out after the declaration
Oh, putol ulit.
of martial law. And it was on that significant day that Rodrigo Duterte was exposed to the tyranny of oppression and the abuse of power by the elite. And he took a decision. On that day, he chose to devote himself to a life of selfless public service. As a professor at the local police academy and as a public prosecutor in Davao, Rodrigo Duterte developed a lifelong passion, some would say an enduring obsession, for law and order, something for which he unapologetically enforced throughout his time as mayor of Davao City. Not as the prosecution say, through sowing murder and mayhem, but through winning the love, respect, and admiration of his fellow citizens. The very same citizens who continued to re-elect him time after time, term after term, on no less than 7 occasions over more than 2 decades. And throughout his 20 or so years tenure as the mayor of Davao, Rodrigo Duterte and his family transformed that city from an outpost of communist insurgency and criminal violence into what is now one of the safest cities, not just in the Philippines, but in the entire world.
Okay, kasi mga kaisyo, mayroong video na ginamit itong prosecution o prosecutor na o prosecution team na nagpapakita ng mga speeches, ng interview ng dating Pangulong Duterte na iniugnay sa patayan, tapos iniugnay ito or ipinakita na umamin ang dating Pangulong Duterte na siya talaga ang pasimuno ng patayan. Atin po ipapakita sa inyo mamaya mga kaisyo. Do atin po pag-usapan ito pag nagkataon itong mga salita ng kabila ng prosecution. Pero makita po natin dito sa speech niya na sabi niya, hindi, during the campaign period pa to mga kaisyo, na kung gusto nyo na mawala itong mga kriminal, gusto nyo ng patayan ng mga kriminal, ng mga durugista, iboto nyo ako. That is his campaign, ha? Take note, yan ang kanyang campaign statement. So in other words, na ipanalo ang dating Pangulong Duterte, that is with the approval of the Filipino people. So mga ayon, gusto ng taong bayan na mawala ang mga kriminal, masawata, mapigil ang paglaganap ng illegal na droga. That is the point of the former president. Kaya binoto siya ng tao kasi ang tao gusto ng kapayapaan. Gustong matigil ang pag-abuso at paggamit ng illegal na droga. That's the point of the campaign. During his campaign, mamaya mga kaisyo, ipakita lang natin bago tayo magtapos. Kasi yan ang video na ginamit ng prosecution. At para sa kultura o ugali ng mga Bisaya, pag magsalita, mayroong baka magalit yung ibang mga kababay. Mayroong baga exaggeration ba? Ganon. No? Ewan ko, gali ba sa mga Bisaya lang yan, mga kaisyo, pero mayroong exaggeration o tinatawag lang hyperbole.
This was indeed the so-called Davao model, which the prosecution wants to persuade you was code for unbridled criminal violence. And this was the type of leader that the Filipino nation wanted in 2016. So, Rodrigo Duterte was elected into power not in spite of, but specifically because of his firm and uncompromising commitment to upholding law and order.
Tama. Tama. Totoo tong sinabi ni Atty. Kaufman dito, mga kaisyo. Dahil sa paraan ng pamamahala ng dating Pangulong Duterte, kaya't binuto siya ng tao. Kaya't by the time that his term ended in 2022, mga kaisyo, mataas ang kanyang trust rating.
And after his election as president, Rodrigo Duterte remained a man of the people without seeking to patronize the people. Gung-ho in his ways and with a belligerent tone, he spoke the tough tongue of the street, not the dissembling discourse of international diplomacy. He said what the people wanted to hear, but he said it in a way that offended sensibilities of world leaders unaccustomed to hearing it, one in particular, and that was what set him on the slippery slope to a prison cell in...
Ang sinabi dito ni Atty. Kaufman, the way magsalita si dating Pangulong Duterte ay pangmasa. Yung karaniwang bang atin-atin lang na usap-usapan na hindi pangkaraniwan sa isang pinuno, mga kaisyo, sa isang bansa. Iba siya magsalita. Ang kanyang, lalo na pag magsalita siya sa harap ng karaniwang tao, na ipapahayag talaga niya ang kanyang saloobin, ang kanyang nasa puso niya. That is why na dating Pangulong Duterte ay mahal na mahal ng taong bayan.
The Hague. And let me tell you how it works. It starts with the media, controlled by the powerful and the politically influential. With a sensational headline and a twisted editorial slant, the moguls sell their papers while promoting the partisan agenda of their backers in power.
Tama yan. Tingnan nyo nga yung mainstream media ngayon, puro banat sa mga Duterte. Pero, walang banat sa admin ni Bangag, admin Marcos. Ha? Kahit na itong si Auntie Claire ay puro pasikat, puro propaganda, hindi tayo nakarinig ng pagpuna kay Auntie Claire galing sa mainstream media, mga kaisyo. This is the mainstream media na ayaw sa pamumuno ng mga Duterte dahil alam nila na hindi nila makontrola o hindi nila madiktahan ang mga Duterte, mga kaisyo. Ha? Oh.
They highlight the salacious content while ignoring the true context, because that is what captivates the reader. And so it was with Rodrigo Duterte, whose speeches were fertile fodder for his enemies and detractors. A man whose hyperbole, bluster and rhetoric, once published, became a natural target for privately funded NGOs and human rights activists, a loose collective more commonly known as civil society.
Kasama na riyan ang Rappler, mga kaisyo.
These people descended upon the Philippines to advance an agenda even more lacking in objectivity than that of the media. And heavily funded by tycoons with even grander designs, they print their glossy reports, replete with iconic photographic images of grieving families and dead bodies in rain-swept, nighttime crime scenes, all dramatically illuminated with the fluorescent glow of neon. Images carefully crafted to shock the conscience and to sway the emotions, and, I may say, to be used by the prosecutor when they don't even relate to the charges.
Itong mga larawan, may namatay dahil pinatay sa kasosyo nila sa droga. Hindi nag-remit, nag-unsihan sa droga. Kinunan ng video, ni-report, kinunan ng larawan, nilagay sa mga newspaper, tapos ginawang sensationalize yung balita mga kaisyo na ito ay biktima ng war on drugs. Nako.
And they gave their slick reports bold titles lifted straight out of a James Bond movie, such as License to Kill, One Shot to the Head, You Can Die Anytime, or simply, They Just Kill. The photographers are feted and their shots exhibited as art all over the world, and the brave journalists who act as their sources win awards and Nobel Prizes. And slowly but surely, their
Nobel Prizes. Ay, Maria Risa!
narrative becomes the sacred, unchallengeable, and unshakable truth. And so the pressure builds up, and the academics who haunt the corridors of the progressive left law faculties far away in the United States tweet their research and publish their articles pontificating about crimes against humanity, systematic attacks against the civilian population, and they point their finger at one man alone, and bandy about slogans such as accountability and the prevention of impunity. They give their gratuitous advice on what should be done, sometimes academics who formerly worked alongside the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court. Communications and complaints are filed, and the rest, as they say, is history. In any event, we're not gathered here today to judge a man on the basis of his coarse attitude or his vulgar language.
Gusto kasi nila dahil sa mahigpit na pakikipaglaban ng dating Pangulong Duterte mga kaisyo. Laban sa kriminalidad, lalo na sa itong insurgency problem ng bansa. Itong alam nyo na, no? CPP, NPA, teroristang mga komunista. Na ang daming front nila ngayon mga kaisyo. Naiwan natin kung ba't tinanggap pa yung mga party list nila mga kaisyo sa Comelec. Kahit proven naman, ang dami ng nagsilabasa na sila talaga nagre-recruit ng mga kabataan para mamundok. Dahil malapit silang naubos sa panahon ng dating Pangulong Duterte, ginamit nila itong issue ng war on drugs mga kaisyo. Bilang ganti o kaya para walang makaupong Duterte sa pinakamataas na posisyon ng ating gobyerno mga kaisyo.
This court has convened a confirmation hearing to verify whether substantial grounds exist to believe that Rodrigo Duterte, the people's president, together with various so-called co-perpetrators, over the years of his governance, devised a criminal policy of wholesale and wanton murder. And since we are in a court of law, it is worth stressing, although I should not have to, cases are decided on the basis of evidence, not supposition, not rumor, not spicy gossip, and certainly not on the basis of political rhetoric and bluster. Because at the end of the day, were it not for those belligerent and controversial speeches, there would have been no impetus to bring the people's president to The Hague. And when the prosecution's evidence is examined, I would ask you to keep an open mind and to question not just whether that evidence has been selectively presented, but whether there exists evidence which the prosecution has failed to produce. And I say this with justifiable cause, particularly with respect to the Duterte rhetoric, as we will prove during the substantive part of our submissions. The notorious speeches on which the prosecution relies have been cherry-picked to suit its narrative while ignoring the many other speeches when the former president tempered his bombastic language by clear reference to the principle of lawful self-defense.
Video mga kaisyo, yung mga speeches niya. Selective. Kumuha lang ng mga pinagtagpi-tagping bahagi ng kanyang mga speeches kumuha lang ng mga bahagi ng kanyang mga speeches para ipakita na umamin o nagdeklara o nag-utos ang dating Pangulong Duterte para ipapatay o magkaroon ng patayan.
We, the defense, have read as many of these speeches as we can find. In fact, in our poky little office on the top floor of the furthest building away in this complex, we have a counter which ticks and ticks. And whenever we come across a speech which contradicts the prosecution's murder theory by reference to self-defense, we give a cheer. And the counter goes up once more, and we celebrate one more nail in the coffin of the prosecution's case theory. As the statistics stand as of today, in contrast to the 20 speeches on which the prosecution relies to prove incitement to kill, we have found 35 more which say the complete opposite. Let me give you 2 examples from the very speeches that the Deputy Prosecutor himself cited today. Let's refer first of all to the famous Pietà speech, which the Deputy Prosecutor referred to. So, this is what the Deputy Prosecutor said. Those of you who are still sober, those who haven't tried illegal drugs, if you don't want to die or get hurt, don't rely on the priests, including human rights advocates. They won't be able to prevent deaths, and so it goes on. But if we look further on in the very same speech, something which maybe the Deputy Prosecutor didn't do, this is what he had to say. To our police officers and other officials, do your job, and you will have the unwavering support of the Office of the President. I will be with you all the way. Abuse your authority, and there will be hell to pay, for you will have become worse than criminality itself. Well, there you are. You have it.
Oh, yan mga kaisyo. Halimbawa lang yan. Makikita natin sa mga darating na araw. Pero, ewan ko kung maaabsuelto ba ang dating Pangulong Duterte, knowing that ICC kailangan nila ng poster boy, kailangan nila ng poster case para may pakita sa bubondo na epektibo ang korte na yan mga kaisyo. Duda ako mga kaisyo. Duda ako na hindi maabsuelto ang dating Pangulong Duterte dahil kailangan nila ang dating Pangulong Duterte for their money making.
Straight in your face, PECSO, exonerating evidence within what is claimed to be the prosecution incriminating evidence. I won't take up my time by showing you the second speech, but there is one. If I have time at the end, I will show it to you. So if you add to that another 10 speeches out of the 20 speeches on which the prosecution rely in its document containing the charges, after all, we are in a court of law and we rely on evidence. And what is the evidence that's produced of these speeches? 20 of them. 10 of them, I submit, and we will show this in the substantive part of our submissions, contain exonerating evidence which support the defense case theory. In other words, if you add the 10, which we've identified in the prosecution's 20, to our total of 35, we come to 45 speeches versus 10, which we say support the use of force only in self-defense. That is 350% more speeches in favor of our defense and 354% more reasons not to confirm the charges. And you can bet your bottom dollar that at the end of today's proceedings, either the victim's self-styled legal assistant to ICC counsel or a prosecution intern will be tasked with scouring the web looking for the means to prove Kaufman wrong. And I will declare it.
Ito mga kaisyo bahagi. Sabi niya dito na itong mga intern, itong mga victims, itong mga prosecution ay halughugin ang internet para papatunayan na mali itong sinabi ni Kaufman, itong defense theory nila na hindi talaga ipinag-utos ng dating Pangulong Duterte ang patayan, kundi nagbigay siya ng utos na gawin ang tama. Kapag manlaban, ay alangan naman na wala kang gagawin.
Counsel or a prosecution intern will be tasked with scouring the web looking for the means to prove Kaufman wrong. And I will declare it, and I'll declare it loudly and clearly, as if the prosecution didn't know it already. It's not enough to state that since the former president made those extremely inflammatory statements and deaths occurred, that he must, as a matter of course, be criminally responsible for those fatalities. At this stage of the proceedings, the prosecution needs to show substantial grounds to believe that the former president actually desired and foresaw that people would be killed as a result of his incendiary language. For the prosecution to assert that Rodrigo Duterte hoped for deaths to occur.
Sabi kasi ni dating Pangulong Duterte, dito sa sinabi ni Kaufman, mga kaisyo, na yung inflammatory, yung maiinit na mga pananalita ng dating Pangulong Duterte, inamin ni dating Pangulong Duterte na itong mga pananalita na, the way siya magsalita o magpahayag, ay talagang magdudulot dito ng patayan. Kasi ikaw nga, pag marinig mo ang Pangulo na hahabulin mo yung mga ninja cops, hahabulin mo yung mga malaman na sangkot ka sa sindikato ng droga. Di kahit kung ikaw naman ay nasa pulis, ikaw ay isang ninja cop, pag malaman o malalaman na ikaw ay sangkot sa illegal na droga, tutukuyin mo, alamin mo yung sino yung mga posibleng magtuturo sa iyo. Di ba? O ito namang mga sindikato ay linisin na nila ang kanilang hanay. Di ba sabi ng dating Pangulong Duterte noong kanyang Christmas message? Sabi niya, baka ito na ang huling Pasko ninyo.
My God, I hate drugs.
Yan sabi ni dating Pangulong Duterte.
Or was recklessly indifferent as to whether deaths would occur, which he was not. That's insufficient. So once more for the record, Rodrigo Duterte's language was aimed not at suspected drug pushers as the prosecution would have it, but directly at those poisoning society with their substances, and not, I stress, with lethal intent. His rhetoric was calculated to arouse fear and obedience.
Yan naman talaga ang pakay ng dating Pangulong Duterte. Para matakot, sabi nga, di ba, palagi niya sinasabi, if you destroy our children, I will kill you. Yan ang sabi ni dating Pangulong Duterte. Pag sinira mo ang kinabukasan ng mga bata, ay talaga, hahantong ka talaga. Pag aarestuhin ka, tapos manglaban ka, ano bang mangyari sa iyo? Alangan namang
to instill fear in their hearts and to inculcate a respect for the law in their minds. Nothing more, nothing less. That was his intent, and it was not criminal. And as many of these drug pushers demanded to enter prison, I remember seeing the images on the television, lining up to surrender and to enter prison. Now, I challenge my colleagues opposite to prove otherwise, because as we all know, in a criminal process, the burden of proof is on the prosecution. They brought this case, and they need to prove it. Rodrigo Duterte need not convince the world of anything, and that is to his fortunate advantage given his current medical condition. He stands behind his legacy resolutely, and he maintains his innocence absolutely. Now, I turn to the general fairness and objectivity of the investigation, which, as we all know, is meant to be an impartial evidence-gathering exercise. As an ex-prosecutor myself, I'm used to investigating agencies, pursuing all reasonable lines of inquiry, assimilating all testimonies, and digesting all documentation and forensic evidence. recommending who to target for prosecution, but not so with this prosecution. When we, the defence, study the course of the investigation in this case, one thing is plain as a pikestaff. The chief prosecutor of this court, Mr. Karim Khan, not only failed miserably to carry out his duties under the Rome Statute, requiring him to examine exonerating circumstances as well as incriminating, but he single-handedly contaminated it, so we alleged, by pursuing a one-track crusade with a view to a predetermined objective. Let me explain. Although the ICC officially authorized an investigation into the so-called Philippines situation in late 2021, it was deferred a few months later back to the Philippines for the official investigation to resume only in late 2023. But the real meat of the investigation into count 1, relating to the activities of that fictitious construct, the Davao Death Squad, had effectively started way before then, with the sole objective of nailing Rodrigo Duterte. Indeed, all the way back in 2018, during its so-called preliminary examination, the prosecution had an individual who will be referred to as P1, handed to them on a silver platter. This P1 had been interviewed at an earlier date by none other than Chief Prosecutor Karim Khan, in his former capacity as a private lawyer, and the self-professed legal...
Oy. Ano ba to? Transmission. Nako. Pinotol. Oy. Pinotol. Forward lang natin mga guys.
her preparation. And what was this information with which Karim Khan had helpfully provided her? A book on which the prosecution relies as evidence. A trashy, scurrilous item of pulp fiction entitled Duterte Harry. Your Honours, the picture on the front cover of that book says it all. It really does scream objectivity, doesn't it? I say that sarcastically, of course. Fortunately for us, the defence, the appeals chamber, has now disqualified Chief Prosecutor Karim Khan from this case. A welcome development as a matter of ethical propriety, but in our opinion, too late in the day to salvage the integrity of the investigation that he had supervised. An investigation in the course of which he concealed his former role as the victim's counsel, who had deemed our client a suspected murderer as far back as 2018 and right up to the very day before this pre-trial chamber issued its arrest warrant. Your Honours, over the next few days, we hope to convince you of the wholly insufficient nature of the evidence against Rodrigo Duterte. We will show you that the paltry number of speeches on which the prosecution rely do not manifest criminal intent. We will also convince you that as hard as they tried, the prosecution's investigators couldn't get even one of its criminal cooperating witnesses, whose reliability is next to zero, to admit that they heard the former president, Rodrigo Duterte, give an order to kill at any time relevant to the charges, or with respect to any of the incidents. And we hope that when you conclude your deliberations, Your Honours, that you will dismiss these grievously misplaced and politically motivated charges. We will ask you to send Rodrigo Duterte back to his family.
Ito mga kaisyo.
And we will ask you to give back to the Filipino people their tatay digong. Thank you, Your Honours.
Yan mga kaisyo. Now dito tayo sa kabila. Ito ang ipinakita kanina mga kaisyo ng prosecution. Itong speech ni dating Pangulong Duterte. Dito mga kaisyo, malalaman po ninyo na ang pakay ng dating Pangulo, this was during the campaign period. Itong mga bahagi na ito ng kanyang video.
Of the man who ran for president in 2016. If we can play that, James.
3 to 6 months, sabi ko, I will eradicate corruption, criminality, and drugs.
Di ba? This was during the campaign. Sige.
If I become the president, I will order the military and the police to hunt down the drug lords, the big ones, and kill them.
During the campaign to, ha? Ito daw mga kaisyo, nagpapakita na si dating Pangulong Duterte talaga nagpapahayag na uutusan niya. Pero, sabi ko na nga, may ugali talaga, lalo na mga Bisaya, na i-exaggerate yung mga statements. Katulad dito na sa sinabi ni dating Pangulong Duterte. Pero di ba may bahagi siya ng kanyang speech na sinabi niya na tanga naman sinong opisyal ng militar at ng pulis na susunod sa kanyang utos na alam nila na mali. Di ba? Mayroon pong akong natatandaan na speech ng dating Pangulong Duterte na sinabi niya yan mga kaisyo. Sinong loko-lokong opisyal na susunod sa kanyang utos, maliban na lang kung si Tory mga kaisyo, na kahit yang si Nicolas, katulad pala sila ni Atty. Kaufman. Yang si Tory mga kaisyo na kahit alam niyang mali yung utos niya, susundin niya. Kaya ginawang utusan, itinalagang MMDA chief si Tory. Dahil alam ng Administrasyong Marcos na loko-loko itong si Tory.
Tell me what my credentials to the presidency. Then I'd say Davao is Exhibit A. Ngayon, dito sa Davao, hindi sabihin ito malinis itong bayan na to. It's not perfect. So that maybe I said, kung dating ako doon sa Pasig, I can promise you, not heaven, but I will promise you a comfortable life.
Promise you a comfortable life.
Senior Simon.
Hanggang dyan lang po muna tayo mga kaisyo. Lalo ng mahaba na kasi ito ang ating live stream ngayon mga kaisyo. So, matagal-tagal pa to mga kaisyo kasi may 3 pang araw na ang itong confirmation hearing nila, no? Confirmation hearing ng dating Pangulong Duterte. No, hanggang bukas tapos 26 at 27 ang confirmation hearing ng dating Pangulong Duterte. So subaybayan po natin ito mga kaisyo. Magkaroon tayo ng mga live stream pag mayroon po tayong pagkakataon mga kaisyo. At kung sakasakali, marami-rami po ang nanonood sa atin ngayon. Hindi ba kayo nakapag-subscribe dito sa ating YouTube channel mga kaisyo, o kahit man sa ating mga sa ating Facebook at sa ating X account, sana'y i-like nyo, i-follow nyo po mga kaisyo. Malaking tulong po ang karagdagang subscribers sa channel natin at sa ating followers sa ating Facebook at sa ating X mga kaisyo. Okay, so hanggang dyan lang po muna tayo mga kaisyo dito sa ating patututunan ng
Issue 101.
Ito po muli ang inyong lingkod na si
Senior Simon.
pansamantala po munang mamaalam, tandaan mas lamang ang may alam. Bye-bye.
At yan ang Issue 101. Ang hilin natin sa mga kinauukulan ay umaksyon. Hanggang sa susunod, maraming salamat sa inyong pagsubaybay.